Hi, I'm Aaron F. Ross. Welcome to this free series of video tutorials on the Maya animation pipeline, the bouncing ball. In this series, we'll learn all about Maya's capabilities for modeling, materials, animation, lighting, and rendering. So we're really doing the full package here. And we'll go into some amount of depth around things like the Maya Graph Editor. If you haven't used Maya before, you should definitely take a look at my Maya Basics series. These are the learning outcomes for this particular tutorial. And as you can see, we're going to cover the entire pipeline from start to finish. So let's get started. As always, the first thing we need to do when creating a Maya project is to set up our project folder to hold all of the assets. Go into the File menu and choose Project Window. I'm going to create it just in the usual location, which is in the current Users Documents Maya Projects folder. Click the New button and give it a name. I'll call it Pipeline Maya Project and click Accept. And that folder has been created. Let's take a look at it. I'll minimize Maya. And here in My Documents Maya Projects, we'll see Default was the old one, and now we've got Pipeline Maya Project is the new one. Let's go back to Maya and set up our scene layout. The first thing is to check in on our working units. It should be set to centimeters by default, but let's double check it just to make sure. Window, Settings, Preferences, Settings. Working units is indeed set to linear working units of centimeter. I'm going to model this scene at 1:1 scale, and I'm going to leave the time base at 24 frames per second. Next, we'll set up our grid. Go into the display menu and choose Grid Options. And I want to mention here that the Grid Options dialog behaves a little bit differently than you might expect. If you open up a scene, you might notice that the state of the grid in the viewport is different than these numbers that read out. And that's because this Grid Options dialog is settings for the next grid you're going to create. So there may be a mismatch between your open scene versus what you see in this dialog. Okay, I'm going to set this up for metric. I'll make my grid 500 units from center to edge. Hit apply. We can see the grid extend. Let's set a grid line every 100 centimeters. And then also subdivide that by 10. And change the grid line color so that the grid lines and the subdivision lines are a different color. And also turn on numbers on the axes for both the perspective and orthographic grids. Click apply, and you'll see now what we have is a major grid line every 100 centimeters, as shown here, and a subdivision line every 100 divided by 10 centimeters, or every 10 centimeters. Now we've got our grid set up. We're ready to create our scene. Just do a simple layout here. We'll tap the space bar and go out to the 4 viewport layout. And we want to work in the top view primarily here to do our scene layout. And let's just dolly back a little bit. I'm using the mouse wheel to dolly back. And we'll create a ground plane. Create polygon primitives plane. And drag that out so that it's about 400 units from side to side. And while it's still selected, we can go into the inputs here to the polyplane 1 node and just set the width and height to 400. Just drag my mouse across both of those and type in a value of 400. And also zero out the position. Just set all the translate values to 0. Okay, so that's our ground plane. And we also need a bouncing ball. So let's create a NURBS sphere for that. It's just a little bit easier to see in the viewports. Go to the Create menu and choose NURBS Primitives Sphere. Draw that out in the top view. And with it still selected, go into its input node. Set the radius to 15 centimeters. And then we can grab the Move tool and just push it over a little bit so that it's in the -X quadrant over here. All right, very good. I'll dolly out in the front viewport and just position it a little bit above the ground plane. Okay, that is our layout. Pretty basic and pretty simple. We can go ahead and save our first scene now. Go into the File menu and choose Save Scene. And we want to change the file type to Maya ASCII. So that'll be a human readable file. And we want to set this up for increment and save so that we can automatically increment file numbers. And to do that, we need to actually do a little bit of a special numbering convention here. I'm going to call this ball.0001.ma. That's set up now, so the next time I want to save, I'll just choose increment and save, and that number will be incremented. Click Save As. And we'll see down here in the command response line that indeed the file has been saved out into the current project scenes folder.